He was a man of many faces. Revolutionary hero, a godlike figure to the people, and a pop icon to the world. Mao's image would control a nation for over half a century. And even in death, his presence lives on. It was a sight to behold, a euphoria like no other, for the beloved Chairman Mao had arrived. Mao's face provided a happy image for the Chinese in posters across the country. His smile promised a kinder world, and hopes and dreams that everyone could share in. In 1949, the Communist Party took power in China, and Mao Zedong, a humble revolutionary, became a Red Star.
And there, in the tradition of emperors before him, stood Mao Zedong.
To begin with, the Communists captured their victorious arrival in Beijing on film. The world's largest propaganda effort had begun.
For the first time in 100 years, the only troops parading through China's streets were Chinese.
Visual propaganda. It was important from 1949 when the Communist Party came to power. Remember, this is a time there's no television. There are not that many movie theaters either, when you consider that China was a rural country. And so art, poster art and photographic art, all of these kinds of things become incredibly important. Large posters that are put up in the streets, people are bicycling by on the way to school, they're going to work, and they're exposed to these things all the time.
Torn apart by a civil war and foreign invaders, China in the 1930s was in need of a hero. Mao and the Red Army took root in the country's remote villages. The Communists were outnumbered by their enemy, the ruling Nationalist Party. But they were united with the peasants in a single cause: to liberate the people from the tyranny of the imperial government. To support the revolution, early artists had already begun to depict Mao through woodcuts. Although a minor figure in the Communist Party's inception, his stature grew. Mao's first taste of publicity came with journalist Edgar Snow's landmark portrait of their struggle, Red Star over China. Snow's insider account revealed the gritty exploits of China's communist fighters to the world and gave fuel to their revolutionary cause. A key episode in building Mao's legend was the Long March, an epic military retreat which saw the communists trek some 8,000 miles on foot to evade the enemy. By surviving the Long March, Mao and the Red Army became even greater heroes to the peasants and fed Mao's growing propaganda efforts. The color red has traditionally been associated with happiness, prosperity, and vitality for ages past in China. Red posters and art prints, inscripted with well wishes, typically adorn households during occasions such as weddings and the Lunar New Year. But when the Communists came into power, they would soon change this ancient tradition.
Once the Chinese Communist Party was confronted with a possibility that all of China would fall in its lap, they were desperately starting to look around for a visual form that not only pleased the peasantry, but the urban population as well.
The Red Star itself personified socialism and communism as decreed by Karl Marx and Engels. It was also the perfect color for China's new revolution. The people warmly welcomed Mao's new visual art. And more, communism imposed its brushstrokes onto the lives of the masses. Central to China's propaganda movement was the influence of Russia's social realist art. The Soviets had provided the Chinese with both the ideology and technology to kickstart the revolution. But more importantly, their art held the key to reaching the masses. China's traditional brush paintings and crafts were far too abstract and ornate. Chinese artists had to be sent to Russia to learn a completely new visual language and make it their own.
我们那个时期在这个创作方面强调生活，我们那个时候还是这一点上来说是比较严谨的。你就比如说吧，我们学生时期就是下乡啊、三同啊、同吃同住同劳动，体验生活，那还是比较下功夫啊。
In ruling the Soviet Republic, Stalin had established his own cult of personality. After taking over China in 1949, Mao too would do the same. The Cold War itself was an ongoing campaign of propaganda, as different nations fought to win the minds of their people. But nowhere else was this as pervasive as in China. To win the hearts and minds of the people, Mao harnessed the arts to change the way people thought and lived. From performance in music to literature and the visual arts, gradually all art forms would serve one purpose only: the Communist Party's ongoing manifesto.
I think it is rather amazing that the art had such an impact in that period. There was no unified language when the communists came to power, and that's one of the reasons that they produced the simplified characters and did away with the complex classical characters, simply because you could not spread the word of revolution across China if you couldn't articulate it in minority languages. So visually, these were incredibly far-reaching in their impact. And this was something that for the peasant people was just such an extraordinary revolution in its own. So you have a lot of those sort of posters about how people are going out to help each other. So they have that community spirit rather than being necessarily purely political.
因为这个艺术啊，原来是听着指令啊做，你完全没有什么这个你自己的想法，你就去做就完了。你只画红光亮高大全，你要攥着大拳头啊，什么打击敌人啊，我们怎么强壮？
所以艺术家就是这个革命机器中的一个螺丝钉，就是你要是要为人民服务，又为党的政策服务。 进入工艺美术学院之后，老师的第一个任务就是打消你要做艺术家的这个念头。他一再跟你讲，工艺美术学院不是培养艺术家，工艺美术学院是培养工艺美术设计人才，要为生产服务，为社会，为人民服务，要生产这个老百姓能够用的东西。
Mao's propaganda reached out to the masses with various messages, campaigns, and reforms. the state controlled all arts and culture through an intricate bureaucracy that extended from the ministry to the schools. Initially, early propaganda art in the 50s encompassed different styles and influences, but this gradually changed.
1957年之前，我们所接触的这些都是为艺术而艺术更多一点。到后来57年以后就变了艺术为政治服务，一直到文化大革命，我们自己要改造思想，要去做为工农兵服务的工作，就一直天天想着，这就是很长的一段时间。
In shaping his utopian vision, Mao wanted to show the world that China too could be a modern nation. In the countryside, he abolished private property and reorganized people into communes. Everyone now had to live and work together under the state. Political meetings replaced traditional ceremonies as Mao's propaganda became all-important.
你像我们那个年龄吧，那时候是刚刚20出头，那时候很理想主义的，而且觉得，毛泽东讲的话，觉得这个，比如说横扫一切牛鬼蛇神啦，造反有理啦，就很浪漫，很理想主义。而且呢，那个时候再加上你知道，青春期、荷尔蒙、反叛精神，我觉得都凑在一起的话，就说你很容易也变成一个狂热分子。
By this time, Mao, the once humble rebel, was enjoying a newfound popularity among the men and women. He declared that women held up half the sky and played a crucial role in China's reforms. He boldly granted them equal rights, something that was unheard of. Old rituals such as foot binding and child marriages were abolished. Once demure and feminine, Chinese women were now portrayed as independent individuals, ready to take on masculine roles.
I tend to compare Chinese propaganda posters with Hollywood movies, in the sense that nobody ever needs to go to the bathroom. Miners come out of the pit with squeaky clean white shirts on instead of all black on their face. So in a way, it's not a real reality. It remains very difficult to actually portray reality as it is.
Even as China became increasingly isolated from the outside world, Mao actively promoted China's communist agenda. He forged new friendships internationally, and at the same time, helped smaller regimes like North Korea and Vietnam fight against American imperialism. In the 60s, he even championed the Black American struggle for equal rights.
Internationalism is a huge theme. You know, at the ideological level, it's still important to them that they connect to the rest of the world. And so you get these fantastic posters that will have this large cast of international characters. And part of it is a fantasy world. That is to say, if we're looking at African revolutionaries, or we're looking at Vietnamese, or we're looking at people from Latin America, they're all holding Chairman Mao's little red book, and it seems like, you know, they acknowledge Mao as the leader of the world revolution. So it's a fantasy world that we see. People would look at this work and they would then fantasize about the world outside China. I wonder what the world outside China is really like. And so in some ways it's very titillating in ways that I think was probably not intended.
In 1957, Mao embarked on his most ambitious plan. His aim? To transform millions of farmers into an industrialized superpower. He called it the Great Leap Forward.
This was unprecedented in the communist world, this notion that you could almost overnight achieve the utopian communist society.
Farmers were told to produce steel in homemade furnaces. Mao's radical aim was to overtake the West in steel production, at any cost. Without any expertise or resources, however, farmers could only churn out unusable pig iron. Having abandoned their fields for the furnaces, many villages ran out of food, and China found itself facing the worst man-made famine in history. Although tens of millions starved to death, Mao continued to hide the truth from the world. The propaganda boasted record growth and bumper crops, and posters showed everyone there was still plenty to eat. But Mao's failure in the Great Leap Forward shook his leadership. Premier Liu Shaoqi and other officials criticized Mao's radical approach. They had advocated more pragmatic measures, which Mao ignored. Under pressure in 1959, Mao stepped down as China's leader. During the early 60s, Mao faced his darkest hour as his political opponents surrounded him. Although he remained the figurehead of the party, Mao no longer enjoyed the power he once had.
Mao reached the conclusion in 1966, the final conclusion, that the main obstacle to achieving the grandiose utopian revolutionary goals he had in mind was in fact the Communist Party itself and the bureaucracy that ran the nation.
To regain leadership of his country, Mao declared war against his own Communist Party, accusing them of becoming capitalist and bourgeois in their policies. He would trigger an event that would change China forever, the Great Proletarian Cultural Revolution. Mao's allies were student activists who called themselves the Red Guards. Like Mao, they too had accused their school establishment of becoming elitist. Mao seized the opportunity to mobilize the Red Guards. He called upon them to stamp out the country's old ideas, cultures, habits, and customs.
在无产阶级文化大革命进入批判资产阶级反动路线的新高潮中。
Fired up by Mao, millions of Red Guards converged in Beijing to pledge their allegiance to the chairman. (1966) saw Mao make the first of several appearances in Tiananmen Square. Like the Beatles in the West, Mao left no doubt as to who was number one.
那时候我觉得每个人的心情就像对待一个神谕，就是神发下来的一个指令，大家要欢呼，要庆祝。
整个会议快结束的时候，毛主席从那后台也出来了。出来呢，那没讲话，向那个观众挥手致意，非常激动，感觉非常幸福。
毛主席万岁！就在那喊呐，是吧？肚子看见毛主席，毛主席说“人民万岁”，就是这样的人民万岁。那个广场那个声音啊，我们都是讲话声音都听不见，就是毛主席万岁，毛主席万岁，很热闹的。
那种伟人的那种气质，那么使我深受震撼。我可以看到他在天安门那个城楼上的那个气质那种状态。 特别是他挥舞帽子跟这个群众这挥舞时候那种气质，真是不是一般人所能具备的，所以他从我内心里产生一种震撼的。所以我后来就是在作品，在我创作这个毛主席题材作品上，就是想要把他这种内心能震撼我内心的这种气质，想把它画出来。
整个的这个社会上所有的环境，全部都称为叫红色的海洋，因为所有的城市、所有的商店，全部都是用红颜色涂起来，人人都要向毛主席献忠心，所以家家户户呢，墙上呢都要挂3个向日葵。这个向日葵的意思就是说，我们都向着共产党，向着毛主席。这个向日葵呢， 画一个向日葵里边呢都要写一个忠字，忠于毛泽东的忠字。一般的都是画3朵向日葵，写3个忠字，然后最好呢这个上面就再放一张毛主席戴着军帽的那个木刻的头像。
Once portrayed as a normal man, Mao was now larger than life. His image became the red sun. Artists were ordered to make Mao Hong Guang Liang, red, bright and shining.
毛主席脸红得像关公一样，那非常不协调，非常不协调。特别是毛主席这个眼睛要画得炯炯有神，要画得非常亮。那么这个里边呢，当然也有一些很荒唐的事情。
Mao becomes almost divorced from the people. He hovers over the masses. He's no longer part of them. I think you can call him a deity, a protective god. Hovers in the air and tries and protect the people from whatever they need to be protected from.
It was typical for people to worship Mao's image in the mornings and evenings. Failing to honor him meant sacrilege.
1966年的时候，很多北京的艺术院校一起在中央戏剧学院的操场上，有人来宣读中央的什么新的文件。在操场，大家都坐在地下，有一学生坐离我不远的地方，不知道为什么，忽然间就听见一堆人喊打死这个反革命，结果那个学生真的给打得头破血流。打过之后我才知道，因为那个学生呢屁股底下放了张报纸。报纸上面印的有毛主席的像，可是那个时候每一天的报纸上面都有毛主席的像。
To helm the Cultural Revolution, Mao enlisted his wife, Jiang Ting. Madame Mao was regarded as the mastermind behind Mao's extreme makeover of Chinese culture. A former movie starlet herself, her passion for the arts led her to shape her own artistic vision for the country. The 8 model operas reinvented traditional Chinese opera and depicted good versus evil in communist fashion. Soldiers, farmers, and peasants became pure heroes, while landlords and other counter-revolutionaries were the scum of the earth.
你说，还跑不跑了？跑！
Being propaganda in the form of a musical, every gesture had to have its immediate meaning and it had to resonate, be read by the audience. It's all realist, it's all exaggerated, it's all magnificent. There were regulations for how one looked up, for how much of the face had to be shown in every single image, for what direction of point of view represented a good person or a bad person. All that was integrated into this kind of iconography, and every Chinese person became extremely familiar. That people would look at an art image and be able to read it so immediately.
When I made my first trip to China in the summer of 1971, I was invited to see a live performance of one of Madame Mao's model theatrical productions. And this was put forward as the most revolutionary art being produced in the world at this time, and this is what we were fully prepared for. And so what you see is the red detachment of women turns out to be very sexy. If you take a look at it again, they're wearing these short shorts, very, very tight, and they have these bare legs. And they're coming out and flying through the air, time and time and time again. Chinese filmmakers at this time, or theatrical production groups, wouldn't be doing anything to, titillate the audience in terms of human sexuality. Not true. I mean, they definitely were doing it.
Mao also created his own propaganda Bible, the Red Book. Edited by Mao's second-in-command, Lin Biao, it became required reading for all.
Every big production needs a script. And what do you do with a script? You memorize the script. It's the biblical text that's linked to this godlike figure looming, over the people in these propaganda posters. You can carry it around. It's very small. You can have it with you all the time. When you're on the bus, you can read it, recite it. Even on air trips, you're going to get on an airplane in those days, and the stewardesses are reciting passages from Chairman Mao in the way that people quote lines from the Bible now in certain kinds of appropriate situations.
Along with the red books were Mao's badges, which were emblems of one's loyalty to Mao, like a talisman or crucifix.
当时做这个毛主席像章啊，是那个你们在外边不知道的，那是红火到极点，那都要做，叫静志，能做这个是无上光荣的。
At the height of Mao's popularity, an estimated 1 billion badges were produced. It became an essential fashion accessory.
所以那个毛主席像章出来以后，那大家伙都抢，都要戴，这是对毛主席的一种感情，和对整个当时那个政治运动的一种感情，绝对不是强迫的。 啊，都是非常自愿、自觉自愿的，而且也是真的。
Beyond Mao, other younger role models emerged to promote the righteous path of the Communist Party. Lei Feng was the leading example of the model soldier. Having died in a car crash at 22, he became the James Dean of his generation. Citizens were told to learn from his example and engage in selfless deeds. In schools, students were shown how to write, draw, and color in the style of the revolution. From children's books to comics, Mao's messages soon permeated every pore of Chinese life, blending reality with fantasy. In this comic, sailors are trapped in a dangerous storm. But they are not alone. With Mao's divine presence, the men conquer adversity and triumph over the elements. Though imagined, the comic reflected Mao's true power. Mao himself had swum the Yangtze River in 1966 at the age of 69 to prove to his critics that he was still a force to be reckoned with. Even as Mao aged in real life, he remained evergreen in art. Chairman Mao Goes to Anian was hailed as the most important Chinese painting ever made. It portrayed a young Mao in 1921, noble and ready to take on the world. It romanticized Mao's image and became the most reproduced painting, with over 900 million copies made. By the late 60s, however, Mao's vision of a model world was coming apart at the hands of the Red Guards. China's temples and intellectuals were condemned. As anti-bourgeois sentiments reached their peak. Red Guards even denounced their own parents and teachers as enemies of the state.
Art and the visual play a role in the Cultural Revolution. Executions were theater. It was highly visual in nature. The whole point was to humiliate people, put huge dunce caps on them, have heavy signs around their neck with tight wires. The skin would eventually break, blood would be dripping down the wires onto the signs. And there were cases we know now where photographers on official assignment decided to do more than they were being asked to do, and they themselves were horrified by what they were seeing, couldn't protest it, couldn't do anything about it, but continued to take pictures because they were authorized to do so. And then they took the negatives and hid them away. In some cases, they hid them away for 15, 20, 25 years. It leaves you with a very, very different impression from that you get from the propaganda posters. That alluring, charming, seductive component is gone, and what you see is the raw brutality that is being recorded in a documentary fashion. It's extremely chilling and shocking.
No one knew where they stood, as paranoia ruled and witch hunts ensued. Those with bourgeois links, or who showed any doubt of their loyalty to Mao, were quickly branded as counter-revolutionary. Even Premier Liu Shaoqi was deposed and jailed.
武斗解放军也分两派，支持这派，支持那派，然后把枪给学生，学生就开始互相开火，真的就是打死了，打死在街头，我自己就亲眼看过。所以在这种情况下呢，那种就是这个现实本身对我提出很多问题来，就你什么是文化大革命？
Propaganda in the Cultural Revolution turned increasingly violent. The war of pictures became a war of words, as people used vivid language to denounce others in the name of Mao.
Big character posters contain narratives about traitors to Mao or supporters of Mao. They divulge secret activities of people. They try to expose people as traitors or supporters. In short, they are much more verbose than visual propaganda of the artistic type really does.
而文革以后，那么最初呢是有一个伤痕美术了。那么就是说，因为文革10年浩劫，所以把人们这个精神摧残得很严重。
文革开始以后，年纪大的艺术家基本上都关牛棚，没有可能性画任何东西。年轻的在学校里面的出身好的可以画毛主席像。
这个毛主席画像呢，在这个县城里面，我一共画了10张左右。可是我画了这个10张毛主席像，辛辛苦苦的画了以后啊，却不料就给我带来了巨大的灾难。1969年的5月6号，我们文化系统的开大会，在会场里边呢，我突然的就被人大声的一喊，就打倒现行反革命分子吴锡安这样的一个口号，我就被许多红卫兵就架上了台。当时是完全不知所措的，在这个之前没有任何的迹象表明他们可能会来斗争我，所以呢，就是毫无准备、思想准备的情况下面，就被救上了台了。主要罪状是用恶毒的诅咒的办法来侮辱毛主席。这张画呢，画得很大，可能离地面可能有3、4层楼高。那么由于这个白铁皮啊，它不太平，那么从地面上往上看呢，那个太阳光照下来以后啊，就在那个毛主席的额头正中央啊，那个铁皮不平，有个凹陷，因此呢，造反派就怀疑我在毛主席的额头上给他装了一个紧箍咒。我如果说你抗拒的话，那死路一条；但是你如果承认了的话，也是死路一条。那我肯定是没活路了，肯定是要枪毙的，因为当时已经枪毙了不少人了，哎，就是说恶毒的攻击毛主席。那么他们原来是准备在这个会议上做一个开除公职、 戴现行反革命帽子，送到一个更小的一个小岛上，一个乡里面，教群众监督劳动。
By 1969, the Cultural Revolution had descended into utter chaos. The Red Guards had taken matters so far out of control that Mao himself called for an end to the destruction. But it would only be years later that the revolution would truly end, with Mao's death. By the early 1970s, the years of countless badge production had taken their toll. The country found itself running out of metal, and the government had to ask people to return their badges to be melted down. In reality, many had become too fond of their Mao collections to throw them away. In 1976, Mao Zedong died at the age of 82. The man who had given China its identity now left the nation with a void. None of China's new leaders could take the spotlight as Mao had.
The immediate successor to Mao, of course, was Hua Guofeng, whose name is hardly remembered now. Hua Guofeng tried very, very hard to create a Mao-like cult for himself. He grew his hair longer. He combed it back the way Mao did. He had photographs created that showed him shaking hands with Mao and so on and so forth. It was a joke. I mean, almost as soon as he did it, people realized that this was just ludicrous. It backfired. It made him seem like a buffoon. And so subsequent leaders after Hua Guofeng, nobody tried to do that again.
The venerated Deng Xiaoping took control and put China on the road to economic prosperity. Deng also admitted the mistakes of the Cultural Revolution and did away with the cult of personality. Not long after Mao's death, his wife, Jiang Qing, was prosecuted for her role in instigating the Cultural Revolution, along with her infamous Gang of Four. She claimed that she had only been following Mao's orders. Sentenced to life in prison, she allegedly killed herself in 1991. Maoist ideology soon gave way to images of progress and technology as China sought to catch up with the rest of the world. Although the old socialist propaganda of the past had diminished, Mao's image was in fact still very much alive in the minds of the masses. On the centenary of Mao's birthday in 1993, Mao Mania made a comeback. Today, Mao conventions provide solace for those nostalgic for the good old days.
那么现在我们就拍卖开始了啊！
我是热爱收藏，或者是产品的收藏，我收了大概1万种。
那么我呢，这个收藏电影海报已经20多年了，一共收藏了有1万多张。
好，这个其实我说的话放在大厅里面也特别好啊，可以气派的啊。
还有这个是东方红，这个是诗词，准备卖300块钱。
一幅呢是陈逸飞画的《青春》，还有一幅是毛主席红卫兵金星华的。 这是我们当年我们的青年的学校偶像。
说价钱便宜啊，价钱贵的问题，其实好东西肯定是贵嘛，是吧？你说对不对？ 毛主席如果很便宜的火车，这里都抢光了，是吧？是货的人啊，是货的朋友，大家可以过来看一下哈。3号，
我只花了60块钱，所以今天感到很兴奋。
买了一个康乐的西湖，民国的漫画，
铁皮画，我花50元，买下来，我觉得很便宜。
这个送给我的外籍朋友，希望他喜欢，然后多了解一些毛主席时代的文化。
In 1974, Andy Warhol's Mao is exhibited for the first time in Paris, acknowledging his universal status as a pop icon. Warhol's originals were 15 feet high, matching the actual size of Mao's official portrait in China.
Warhol's Mao was really an important piece of history, and many artists have kind of copied or have followed his idea. While in Europe and the US, a Mao with a blue face is perceived as being nice, as being royal, as being elegant. In Asia, the blue face is perceived as being sick. And so that is a bit funny. So in Asia, I think that the blue face of the Mao, they don't like it very much. But 1 of the 10 has a red face. And I think that, a lot of people here in Asia like especially that specific Mao because it reminds them of China, and red is the typical color.
By 1988, Chinese artists had themselves begun reinterpreting Mao and the impact of the propaganda that had dominated their lives for so long. Wang Guangyi created this stark portrait of Mao behind bars, questioning and dividing the chairman's once untouchable image. Later, Wang achieved fame by reinventing the Chinese propaganda poster with slogans of Western brand names. China kitsch had arrived, and political pop was born.
Those original instigators of the political pop movement all had very legitimate experience of a political period in China, and all of those responses that they produced in their various ways were their very personal responses to either work that they'd done during the Cultural Revolution, or it was because they'd seen that imagery firsthand that they were able to have such a direct response to it.
Soon, many other artists, both Chinese and foreign, would express their own versions of red art, creating a commercial market for Mao. Across the Atlantic in 1994, New York-based Chinese designer Vivian Tam and artist Zhang Hongtu made Mao a fashion statement. The collection was a worldwide sensation, but many Chinese retailers were too scared to carry it.
这件作品在公开展览之后，有个朋友跟我讲，说你这个东西如果在中国的话，你起码要被枪毙3次。这实际上是一种恐惧感，是你对毛的一种恐惧感。即使毛死了，但是作为一种他曾经在你头顶上压迫你的这种政治偶像，他仍然有他的威慑力量。As you've seen, the door just a typical door in New York City with a lot of lock. I had a soundtrack of door knocking. The door knocking, I cannot open the door. But you have to see through the viewer to find out who's knocking the door. Because this is a door for normal people, for everybody. But the Mao is always watching you from outside. 我做了这些个毛的作品，我自己把它当做一种心理治疗一样。因为我开始做的时候呢，我也有一种不安， 有一种觉得甚至有一种罪恶感，因为你在中国的话，你把毛随便把它绞碎了再拼贴起来，这绝对是犯罪的。一个乒乓桌上面挖空2个毛的形象，然后呢，展览的时候这个乒乓桌大家可以玩，可以打乒乓球，可是这个乒乓球如果碰到毛的形象的话，这个球就掉下去了，你就输了。其实我的想法非常简单，就是毛仍然是不能触动的。
Zhang Hong Tu I find particularly interesting because he incorporates images of Chairman Mao in his work, and that reflects what he experienced living in China before he moved to the United States. And I think by putting Mao on a Quaker Oats box or putting Mao's body on the zodiac figures, I think that's rather irreverent. And it's the ubiquitousness of some of the images that everyone can relate to, and that's one thing that I found really appealing.
Does this look like an oatmeal box? Does it? It's the leader of China at that time. But you know what it says? After arriving in the United States, he began a daily morning routine of having Quaker Oats for breakfast. That's because when he was in China, every morning he had gruel. But then, after 5 years, he thought the man in the Quaker Oats box resembled Mao. And he just put that oatmeal box there and put Mao. Mao was their leader, so he put that on it.
The artist. Say your name for me.
Hi.
Welcome.
Are they like generals?
Yeah. Do you know Chairman Mao? Yeah, Chairman Mao's dress. Because in the Cultural Revolution, back to 30 years ago, everybody wears the same thing, the same dress.
To me, it's the dragon that looks the hardest, because you see all the details in the neck and the mane and stuff and the colors.
Yes, there's more detail. Every single detail. Every day you see a hand, you see a lot of work. What do you think about this piece?
That's cool.
Why?
Because it's old McDonald's.
Today, Mao remains a symbol for all things Chinese, and the people continue to revere and protect his image. The French car company, Citroën, had to apologize to the Chinese for depicting Mao satirically in a campaign. And other inappropriate exhibitions of Mao remain taboo in China. These days, from flea markets to high-end auctions, Mao's image can be found on sale everywhere.
Part of me says that if Mao could see all the tourist stands with his image being sold right next to an image of Buddha, other kinds of religious paraphernalia, and the sort of marketing of this softened Mao image, he'd probably roll over in his grave. He certainly, I think, although he had great hopes for China, and I think he hoped that his own image would remain important, this is not what he had in mind.
I think a lot of people have a very ambiguous relationship with Mao, or the memory of Mao. And it's one of those sort of Chinese conundrums that I think would be very difficult for any non-Chinese person to appreciate or understand.
枪毙不枪毙？枪毙！知道吧？出来讲讲话嘛的。弟兄们，抓革命促生产，老有的事情我们不管。自己管什么？
I think one of the keys to understanding why the image lingers today is that the Communist Party cannot afford to jettison Mao. It's gotten to the point where to remove the picture from Tiananmen Square, there wouldn't be any protests if his picture was taken down, if his body was removed. But the fact is the Chinese Communist Party invested a lot of capital into this imagery. They want him remembered in a grandfatherly kind of way. There's a George Washington, Abraham Lincoln, kind of figure. But if you question the ordinary person, what can you tell me about Mao? What's your image of Mao? You're going to come up with some very round, fuzzy, totally non-threatening kinds of images.
我觉得毛这个形象在中国比较复杂，他不是黑和白，他不像比如希特勒屠杀犹太人，而毛呢，他说我建立一个新的中国，中国就更加的，我觉得更加困难，因为中国现在不允许你发表可以批判，就不允许你发表批判毛泽东的文章，或者是或者绘画作品。 因此，你既然没有这种可能性去发表，别人也没有可能性去听到你的声音，因此我觉得更困难。但是从长远来讲，我觉得迟早这种现象总是会改变的。我还相信这个总是会改变的。
战士打把营队，把营队，胸前红花扬彩霞，愉快的歌声满天飞，弥嗦。